Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation on Net Zero Compare. Today, I'm joined by Josh Dorfman, co-founder and CMO of Plant D, host of Super Cool and a longtime voice in the sustainability and climate innovation space. Josh has worked at the intersection of media, entrepreneurship, and climate solutions for many years. Through Plant D, he's helping bring carbon negative building materials to market. Through Super Cool, he highlights businesses and leaders who are working to make climate solutions commercially viable. In today's discussion, we'll talk about the business case for climate solutions, the role of materials in decarbonizing construction, and what separates climate technologies that scale from those that struggle to reach market adoption. Josh, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much. So nice to be here.
Josh, you've worked across media, sustainability, and entrepreneurship for quite a long time. Could you briefly walk us through your journey and what ultimately led you to focus on climate solutions and sustainable business models? Because it's always interesting to see how people arrive in this space, because many professionals working in climate and sustainability today come from very different backgrounds.
Sure. In the 1990s, I graduated from university and had a 3-year plan coming out of school. I knew that I was going to be a ski bum for a year, and so I moved to Colorado and lived in Vail and did any job I could possibly do to ski as much as possible. And so that was fantastic. And then I went right from Vail to Nanjing, China, which was then the second part of my 3-year plan. So I went to China for 2 years, thinking about a career potentially in diplomacy, perhaps with the State Department, um, maybe CIA, who knows, who knew, but I figured if I went to China and could figure out how to live, thrive, and survive on the other side of the planet, hopefully some good stuff would happen. And as it turned out, I was teaching English on a university, Nanjing University of Science and Technology, and I got a part-time job working in a factory that made bicycle locks for an American company called Kryptonite. So these locks were like stronger than Superman, right? Made of kryptonite.
I
And,
own one.
oh, all right. So uh, Nanjing was the site of Kryptonite's first factory in mainland China. And so through some luck, I got a job working there, which was absolutely fascinating. But I was really just diving into every aspect of life in China because I thought, okay, I want to learn all the kind of cultural sides of this country, the academic side, the business side, the manufacturing side to prepare for, this career that I thought that would be kind of cross-cultural in some way. And probably in diplomacy. But I got really interested in bike locks and I got really interested in business. We opened a third factory probably about a year and a half later in southern China. I was traveling with the owner of that factory, the Chinese businessman, to a restaurant where we were going to celebrate that deal. And before we went into the restaurant, he said to me, Josh, look, my Mercedes is the biggest Mercedes of all the Mercedes in this parking lot. Now, this was 1997, communist China, and yet here are all these Mercedes, right? So there's still a lot of Hong Kong money from southern China bleeding into southern China. But yet still it's communist country and everyone's got a Mercedes here and these guys are, this guy's really excited and his chest swelled up with pride. And I thought in that moment, all right, I've been here for a couple of years. I've seen all the highways, the bridges, the tunnels, everything being built so fast. There's 1 billion people riding bicycles here. This is a big bicycle market, the biggest one in the world. We could probably sell a bunch of locks. But this dude's like us. He wants a bigger car. He wants the best car. He wants more, bigger, just like Americans do. What's going to happen when these 1 billion people riding bicycles all get cars? What's that going to mean for energy? What is that going to mean for competition in the Middle East? Something we're seeing also again right now. What is it going to mean for rising standards of living in China and then Russia and then Eastern Europe and India as everyone else tries to develop economically and get more? I didn't have the answers, but that was the catalyst for me to begin thinking about the impacts then of all of that economic development on the global ecosystem's capability of sustaining it, right? So it was like, how's this math going to work if we're just burning more fossil fuels within a finite system? I didn't like have all of that fully processed in my head, but I felt like in that moment, I was being shown the future. And that led me on a journey that eventually got me to think about using business as the lever to affect positive change because I really like business. And my career trajectory eventually moved toward initially thinking, okay, I live in America. I have this awareness about climate. I know all these consumers all over the world want to raise their standard of living. Can I play a role in helping to move consumption in a more sustainable direction? And that was really how I got into the industry.
Thank you very much for that introduction. By the way, I visited the state of Colorado last year, and it's one of my favorite states so far.
It's a really good spot. It was a really, it was a and that too was just an incredible experience. I did whatever I could. I actually lived in the closet of a condominium with like 6 other guys because that's all I could afford for rent. But I did manage to ski every day, so I consider
Yeah.
it a wild success.
Beautiful state, perfect weather, and close to the mountains. That's for
Absolutely.
sure. And now I'd like to talk about the business case for climate solutions, because a recurring theme in many climate discussions is the need to move from good intentions to viable business models. So, from your perspective, what are the key factors that determine whether a climate solution can become commercially successful?
Well, it depends on the industry, of course, but I see two types of innovation, and they both actually end up doing the same thing. Either companies are literally inventing technology and solutions that climate technology, climate solutions that disrupt an industry, right? That have a, a that not only cut carbon though, but also are doing something important in terms of either helping companies save money, make money, or improve their customer experience in some way. Or they're taking proven technologies, batteries, electric vehicles, solar, and they're innovating the business model that makes selling those solar panels or those batteries or integrating them together to an end customer in some way that actually is economically better for that end customer. And that's sort of like very kind of theoretical. So let me tell you what I mean in practicality. Just a couple of examples. There's a company called Butterfly, Buddefly. Butterfly is run by this guy Al Sablui, who I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Godfather, but he kind of talks like he could be the other like Corleone, Mike like Michael Corleone's brother, because he shows up in like a McDonald's or a Taco Bell and he says to the franchise owner, I'm going to make you an offer that you can't refuse. Right. But that offer is I'm going to upgrade, replace all of your refrigeration, all of your lighting, all of your, every system that uses so much energy in this fast food franchise with the most modern equipment for free. And I'm going to do that because I know that I can engineer the financing for all that equipment in such a way where the spread or the arbitrage on the energy savings is going to be I'll recoup my investment on the energy savings alone. Me, Butterfly, will take most of the energy savings for putting in this state of the art, highly efficient equipment. You, franchise owner, get all new equipment and a little bit of the savings, but it's totally worth it for you. And now I've got this really big business. I'm in 8,000 fast food franchises around the country, growing exceptionally fast. I didn't invent anything, right? I didn't invent the energy efficient equipment. I built some AI to make this model run very efficiently, but it's really the business model innovation that is enabling like a Taco Bell or a Kentucky Fried Chicken to now be a far more energy efficient kind of low carbon operation. I see that type of thinking across multiple industries. And so what all these companies are figuring out is how do I come up with a value proposition as a climate technology company that gets that end customer to buy because I'm actually solving that end customer's pain. I'm not talking about selling technology. I'm not selling them a new refrigerator. I'm actually just selling them like modernization and some savings, right? I'm not talking about saving the planet. I'm talking about saving money and getting a more modern facility. I leave that stuff out till the end, right? Like I will talk about saving the planet, and I will talk about, if I have to, technology. But the companies that are winning are solving are solving customer pain, and we see that across the board in every industry.
Well said. And from our observation, we can also say that many sustainability initiatives struggle not due to the lack of technology, but mostly due to challenges in economics, procurement, or market adoption. So thank you very much for those examples as well. Now let's talk about your work at Plant D. Plant D focuses on developing carbon negative building materials made from rapidly renewable biomass. If you could explain to us the core idea behind the technology and what problem in the construction sector it is trying to address.
So yeah, I appreciate that. And I guess we'll have to work on our global translation of it because we pronounce it planted.
Plant it.
But as long as you're pronouncing it in some form or fashion, then, I'll take it. But anyway, Planted is a company we started 5 years ago. And was me and two senior SpaceX engineers. We came together in North Carolina with the thought that could there be some biomass that might grow much faster than trees? Maybe even could we find something that could grow 5, 6, maybe even 10 times faster than trees? We looked at industrial hemp. We looked at bamboo. We looked at waste stalks from corn, rice, you name it. The idea being that if we could do that, then we could efficiently pull carbon from the atmosphere on less land far faster than the way trees can do it. And we all talk about plant trees to save the planet. They honestly just grow too slow. And Elon Musk 5 years ago, so it's working with SpaceXers, had said there's just like the math doesn't pencil. There's just not enough land, honestly, to really lean on trees as a viable solution to saving the planet. And it's fun to talk with engineers who, when you get beyond sort of the hype and the narrative and you look at the numbers and you're like, yeah, we got to find something that grows a lot faster. So we eventually found a grass that grows 10 times faster than trees. And then it had really strong structural integrity. So we said, well, could we turn this grass into something useful that we could sell? And we wanted to, in that point, replace timber because we felt let's keep trees in the ground. Let's go replace timber. In America, timber goes into home building. And so we started talking to home builders and saying, hey, we've got a biomass. It's very strong. It's actually stronger than trees. We've got a team of SpaceXers. We're going to build a factory. We're going to turn this into something. What should we turn it into? And what's the problem? And so the first use case for us is something called oriented strand board. That's a panel. In America, when you're building homes, that's what you nail to the 2x4s to build a house, right? These panels. So we said, great, we're going to go build those panels because there's more of those panels in the house than really any other engineered material. What's wrong with it? Well, it turns out in parts of the United States where the most home building is taking place, particularly in the South, the Southeast, even across to Texas, it can get very humid. And if those panels get wet, they can lose their structural integrity. The grass that we turn into panels is far more moisture resistant. And that's actually a big performance point for us, for the industry in of itself. We invented a new production technology. I'll just go faster. The new production technology, no smokestack on the roof. It's all electric. So we go to great lengths to tissue culture this grass, get it into our own commercial greenhouses, get these small plants, once they're healthy and vigorous, onto farms to get them in the ground. That takes a lot of work. And so we definitely don't want to just pull carbon down and then manufacture it into something and have a smokestack where all that carbon goes back up into the atmosphere. So we electrify, right? And so that means that 70% of the carbon that we pull down in the field actually is retained in the panels that get locked away in new homes. We're working with the largest home builder in America today. It's a company called D.R. Horton. They build 1 out of every 7 homes in America, about 100,000 homes a year. We have an order for them for 10 million of these panels. It's roughly 100,000 homes, so it's going to keep us busy for some time. That's what Planted's doing.
That's extremely interesting. And actually, I find it very important because nowadays construction materials are often overlooked in everyday climate discussions. But I think they represent a significant portion of global emissions. And by saying that, the construction sector is responsible for a large share of global emissions, particularly through materials like concrete and steel. So if you could tell us, where do you see the largest opportunities for emissions reduction in building materials over, let's say, next 10 years?
Well, we would look at it probably a little bit differently than most people. Certainly, the conventional view is that steel and concrete have massive carbon footprints, and we don't dispute that. I think what's also less understood is actually the carbon footprint of the timber industry. When you look at, okay, well, how are you going to solve climate change, right? You're talking about gigatons. You're talking about, so there's, um, how many gigatons of materials are made a year, how much steel, how much concrete, how much timber. It's just, these are the biggest industries on earth, right? And so our view is, it really doesn't we think cutting down trees and using trees is a good idea. It's not, right? When you cut down a forest, you're still disturbing all that soil. There still is all this carbon that's going up into the atmosphere. There still is this massive supply chain. I mean, you're basically taking a tree that's 50% water and transporting it over a long distance. Like, a lot of people don't really necessarily want to get into that. We feel like trees are a solution. We don't feel that trees are a solution. We don't feel that any of that is a solution. So our starting point is to get into industries where we're replacing trees. So we look at home building, but the technology that we've built enables us to build panels that, they're 4 feet wide, but they can be, up to 40 feet long, because we've built a continuous press, right? So we can start to get into materials that also can be of any thickness, because we can tune the thickness. We've started with something that's thinner for a wall, but we can get to a stud or a 2x4, something that's much thicker. And where I'm going with this is, our objective is to get it, to build products that are like mass timber products that get into commercial construction as well, that have wide application for ultimately how buildings of all kinds are constructed. So home building is a starting point for us, but we have ambitions that go far beyond that.
And there is a growing conversation around low carbon materials, supply chain transparency, and embodied carbon in construction. So it would be also interesting to hear your perspective on where real progress is happening. Is it technology and developing those new materials, as you mentioned?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, when I look at, um, steel, you see where steel's going to go. It's not like someone's going to. What does it mean to make a green steel? It means that you've replaced a fossil fuel furnace with an electrified furnace, and you're running that furnace off of some sort of renewable energy generation, right? Which is what you should do, right? That's exactly how you should do it. But it's still steel, right? It's not like someone's like, we have better steel. No, it's like steel is steel, right? When it comes to cement, you certainly see innovation around the edges. You're seeing low carbon. You'll see low carbon cement, low carbon concrete. There's some. I think there's even some bigger companies more than startups that probably have more traction today. I think startups have struggled to actually gain traction in that industry. Obviously, it's just all of these industries are very difficult. So I don't really see lots of material innovation that has really gained commercial traction yet. Um, but again, this may be an industry where it's like, it takes 20 years to become an overnight success, right? That doesn't necessarily line up with venture capital returns, but maybe some companies will go faster, or maybe you figure out the financing that makes that work. The way that we think about, our aspiration and vision around innovation. So we on the one hand, we've had this vision where we built this production technology. It's modular, right? So I said to you, it's flexible. We can build all sorts of different products off of it, but it's a production line that's about 140 feet long. So we've taken a massive mill the size of a small town and really shrunken down the footprint of it. And we had a vision that the way that we lay out our factory is multiple lines running parallel to each other, so that in a relatively small footprint, you can have, the wall panels, you can have the 2x4s, you can have the mass timber products for commercial construction, all coming out of the same facility. Where we're going in our model is we're starting to think about, okay, version 2, version 3 of that production technology. We actually are starting to envision a future where we collapse the distance between the farm and the factory, where we actually bring the production technology to the farm, right? So that you almost effectively eliminate the supply chain because you can also grow the grass very close to where homes are going to be built, almost adjacent to where homes are going to be built. So you collapse this entire supply chain, get rid of the carbon, get rid of the cost, and really do something that transforms how we think about like our industrial manufacturing and economy, and just creates far more supply chain flexibility. That's where we're trying to get. That's one vision we have, and that might not be every use case. Um, but I think it's still, unfortunately or not, relatively early days for seeing, real traction in these industries for new, innovative, climate materials.
Got it. Now, let's talk about scaling new materials. Developing a new building material is one thing, but getting it adopted by the construction industry is another. So, in your view, what are the biggest barriers startups face when trying to introduce new materials into established construction supply chains?
Well, the I think startups have done a good job of getting. Well, so maybe I should say it this way, because maybe I look at the startups that have done a good job and they've overcome the challenge. The challenge is figuring out how you initially who your pilot partners are. What companies are actually going to take some risk with you or do run some pilots to actually start to get you on some sort of adoption curve, right? How can we get this product into market, even in some small fashion, hit some milestones, generate some proof points? Um, I look at a company like Sublime Systems that did that very well. They've been a little bit stymied because some of their federal funding that they were counting on to scale their commercial factory has gone away, and they're trying to figure out, now what they do in terms of, their low carbon concrete. I look at a company like Brimstone, similarly in that same kind of industry. Great momentum, but just tough to get this to get beyond the pilots. So that's the first hurdle is like, can you get your sort of, if you don't have a corporate partner, you're not going to get to market. Like you're just not, because I mean, that's probably why you're asking the question, right? There's so much resistance to a new material. How is it going to last? Is the startup going to be around in 15 years if something goes wrong, right? What's the warranty? Like all of this risk. And so you really need those large corporate partners to help get you through some of those initial hurdles. The challenge then becomes, can you cross the chasm? And because usually you're talking about some first of its kind technology, right? It's not really about the material. It's about what's the fact, how are you going to make it? Um, that is very difficult. And so I think that, to a certain extent, that's TBD, because a lot of startups I haven't really seen them actually get across that chasm. Um, I've seen, particularly when you talk about, if you're talking about structural building materials and really changing the built environment. I have seen things that I think are wonderful and fascinating. Companies like Interface Floor, that is now, which is maybe the greenest company on the planet. Honestly, I mean, their next milestone is to try and be carbon negative as a company by 2040. Public company. I think they're probably at a maybe $1.5 to $2 billion market cap today. They have carbon negative flooring tiles, right? Like, it's awesome. They're doing so much innovation, but they have a whole company commitment to that to make that even possible. It's also hard, but I think it's really a classic case for building materials companies crossing that chasm when you have first of its kind production manufacturing technology, and having the financing line up to do that is really tricky. I can just tell you, in the case of Planted, that's really why that also drives a lot of our vision toward modularization, because there's no way we were going to be able to raise $300 million to go build a factory at the scale that the industry operates at, right? We had to think through, how do we rethink our economics to have a viable path that can be funded to get us to commercial scale.
Got it. And I think many climate technologies encounter a similar challenge. Technical innovation may move quickly, But then industry standards, procurement processes, and regulatory frameworks move more slowly. At least this is what we hear when we talk to founders and owners of those companies.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say other than yes?
Exactly. Now let's switch to the role of media and storytelling. Alongside your work at Planted, not Plant D, as we already established, you host the super cool platform where you highlight companies working on climate solutions. So, if you could tell us from your experience, how important is communication and storytelling in accelerating the adoption of climate technologies?
Oh, I think it's essential that you're telling the right stories, but I also think again that goes to really understanding what matters to your customer at what kind of stage in your business. So what I mean by that is in how we think about super cool, super cool, the filter for us where we're curating is we are talking to companies, usually growth stage climate tech companies, sometimes publicly traded companies, but you know they're they're at a point where they are at commercial scale. They're in market, right? And so when you're at commercial scale and you're in market, the every successful climate technology company goes through this same evolution where they start to understand that what they should not be talking about is their technology, and what they should not be talking about is their mission, right? Like what they should be talking about is everything that their customer cares about that hopefully their product solves. I'll give you an example. I was talking with Mary Powell. She's the CEO of Sunrun. They are the largest installer of solar panels in America, residential on homes. They're the only company that's done over 1 million homes. They're also now the largest and fastest growing provider of battery storage for residential homes. And when I was talking with Mary about that, and she said this to me. She's like, "Look, I had to get with the team and be like, we're just not going to talk about kilowatt hours anymore, right? And we're just not going to talk about saving the planet anymore because we have a bigger opportunity, and because really what our customer cares about, what everyone cares about, is can you have control over your energy bills while energy costs are rising? Can you have a sense of security that you can take care of your family during extreme weather when the power goes out, right? Do you have peace of mind that your power is going to stay on, right, under extreme circumstances? This is what we're selling. This is the story that we're telling now because this is actually what customers want to buy, right? We're actually addressing and solving their pain because our product can do those things. And the storytelling around that kind of value proposition is so important to actually break through and gain market adoption. Earlier stage companies, right? Earlier climate tech companies, they're not necessarily doing that because early climate, tech companies, they don't have a product. So they're trying, and their customers probably investors. And so they're selling something different, right? They're selling promise. They're selling vision. They're selling, here's how we're going to change the future. It's all about mission, right? It's all about technology. It's all about team that's going to execute this thing because selling to customers is all theory, right? Like you can say, yeah, it's going to have these product benefits and customers going to love it, but the investor needs to feel like, okay, the technology has a path, right? The economics work, the team is right, and I'm buying into the mission of what this company's trying to do. I'll write their series, their seed, maybe their series A, but then that evolves and the story needs to evolve. So super cool. Yeah, we focus in on helping to share those stories because I want to understand when I talk to a really interesting company that's succeeding as a climate tech company, how are you getting to market? How are you convincing your customers to buy your product? What are you doing? And a lot of that is, it's not all storytelling, but a lot of it really it hinges on getting the story right.
Plus, spreading the word out there, because what we see very frequently at Net Zero Compare is that many technologies exist, but the decision makers often lack clear and practical information about them. So that's the problem.
That's interesting that you see that as the problem. I
Yes,
Yeah, I don't know that I see
they.
the problem, but that's interesting that you do.
Yeah, when we talk to companies, sometimes they are not even aware of solutions. They're up there in the market, so they are trying to build teams internally, spend a lot of money instead of just reaching out to the third party providers.
Yeah, but I guess I would say that's incumbent on startups to go get out there and,
Yes.
but no, it's true, right? So yeah, so like, yeah, come on a podcast, go tell your story. But I also think that, I mean, that's absolutely true. And that is part of our theory of change. When we bring on a company and we've vetted that company, I'll give you an example. We brought on this company called Brainbox AI. I think right before they were acquired by Train Technologies. And Brainbox came up with a solution. It's a company based in Montreal, where they can. It's almost all entirely cloud-based AI software, so very little hardware in your building. But they can take over your HVAC system, run your HVAC system, cut your energy costs for your HVAC. I think by up to 25%, your carbon by up to 40%. Um, and they do that because they know the angle of the sun, they know the wind speed around the building, they know the carbon intensity of the grid at any moment, they know, the price of energy. And they know with like 95% certainty who's going to be occupying an office floor 6 hours from now. So they can gradually heat that space or cool that space, given all those variables, to do in a way that is the most effective. You do it slower, you spend less money, then you have to crank up the heat or cool a space down really fast. Um, they're in over 17,000 buildings. They're growing really fast. They got acquired, but someone called me up. She was listening to the show and she was like, "Wow, I didn't know about this." She worked for a developer in New York City, and she said, "I'm going to bring this to my boss because one, I think our competitors are using this, and two, now I understand that it's de-risked." And so that is really important for companies to get out there and talk about how they are gaining adoption, that this is, like we've been talking about, de-risked technology. It's being adopted. Your competitors are using it. So yeah, I do think it's uh, podcasts, other mediums are very important for storytelling.
I totally agree. I've never heard about that company yet. So that only proves us right. You have spoken with many founders and operators building climate companies. Based on those conversations, what distinguishes climate startups that successfully scale from those that struggle?
It's 100% what we're talking about right now, Carl. It's this idea of recognizing. In fact, I was just talking to the CEO of a very large public battery storage company, and they've been having from the outside a lot of success. And he still said to me, he said, "We need to focus more on product benefits and less on our technology," and that is, like, I can't emphasize that enough. The companies that are winning are figuring out not just to talk about the benefits, but to almost like we talked about in the beginning when I mentioned Butterfly, to design the value proposition in such a way that it's so compelling for an end customer to embrace that solution. I'll give you another example. There's a company called Forum Mobility that built in America, I think, the largest charging station for big semi trucks, 18-wheeler trucks.
I've heard about them.
Okay. And so for drayage, so they're at the ports and they're for the trucks that take the shipping containers off of large ships and bring them a couple miles away to warehouses, and they're just going back and forth, back and forth. So they thought, well, geez, okay, so we've built this storage, but these trucks are proven, and not just, we're all waiting for the Tesla semi to come, which is going to be amazing, but Volvo has a proven technology around EV semis. There's other manufacturers that have proven EV semis, but they're expensive. And so they said, well, let's do some business model innovation here. Let's figure out a way to offer these electric semi trucks to really what are individual, a lot of small mom and pop family businesses that run these small kind of trucks back and forth. And, where the trucks can be $300,000-$400,000. They're big investments. Let's figure out a way to offer as a monthly subscription where we bundle the electric semi truck and all the charging and all the maintenance at a price that's going to undercut the cost of running your trucks on diesel. Then, right. So then they make it very easy for someone to switch because now it's just, now it's an operating expense, not a CapEx expense, right? It's not a capital expenditure. Um, and it enables their operations to run far more efficiently by moving to electric. They didn't invent the trucks, they didn't invent the charging, right? But they understand because they come from the solar industry. They understand how to go to financiers and get longer term financing for these electric vehicle assets because now they're proven that they will last longer and make the whole business model work. And it's only by innovating all of that business model that you actually get those electric semi trucks on the road. And so that's just so fascinating to me, right? They have to figure out this value proposition that actually unlocks the change that we all want to see. It's not about the truck, it's not about the charging, it's how you put the whole package together.
Simple, but very impressive. Thank you very much for that example. Now, let's talk about corporate demand for climate solutions, because nowadays many companies face increasing pressure around scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. Are you seeing more demand from corporations for practical decarbonization solutions, or there is still a gap between commitments and implementation?
I think it's a straight line up in terms of corporate demand for solutions, but I think that it's just really about the innovators coming to market with solutions that frankly don't ask any corporation to pay more for the sustainable choice. Like you just can't, right? Like if you have a business that you want to scale that depends on somebody paying you a premium for your product simply because it's a climate solution, that is going to stay very small. I think that checking, checking all the boxes that corporations need is really hard. Like you mentioned some of the pitfalls of how difficult it can be. I think corporations are still looking. I don't think that's changed. Um, and I think and I think progress is being made. But look, I was talking to a guy who runs a company called Shine. He's innovated some technology to get solar into large multifamily apartment buildings where you have this split incentive issue traditionally, right? Well, like, will the owner put all the solar on the roof if all the renters get all the benefit on their bills? And it's hard to monitor and manage all of that. He's figured out a solution that actually makes it work for everybody, and he's growing quickly. But one thing he said to me, he's like, "Yeah, if I go to some of the largest um, uh, real estate owners in America who have apartments in lots and lots of cities. Some will move fast. Others think they're moving fast and they're like, oh, talk to our ESG department, talk to our sustainability team. And he's like, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the ESG team and then the project just died in either analysis paralysis or we have to check all these insane boxes and it just doesn't go anywhere. So there's all sorts of pitfalls to watch out for as you're trying to navigate your way. But I do believe that corporations are looking for solutions that are going to make their businesses better. And I definitely believe that the most cutting edge climate technologies, hands down, do that.
And as we know, corporations always look for money and to benefit more and to make more profit. So once they see that there is a benefit down the road, 100% they will switch. Also, I had this conversation at the beginning of this week, and founders of companies with green products admitted the same thing. Yes, if the customer will go to, let's say, they go to a store, they have two products sustainably manufactured and product B at the same time, at the same price, of course, they will opt for the green product. But if the green product is way more expensive, then the majority will switch to product B. So down the road, the price always is the most important factor. Probably the same for corporations.
Amongst all the other factors, right? It's risk.
Yes.
Does it fit our processes? Do you have all of the certifications? Do you check every single box, right? That we need to be checked in order to, make a switch in our big bureaucracy. Like it's certainly challenging, but I do think the interest certainly is there, and that hasn't gone away.
And in many industries, companies have made public commitments, as we know, but the operational steps needed to achieve them are still evolving. So we'll see what the future brings.
I think that's fair. I will say this though. We had on Super Cool on our podcast, I also had some two executives from Amazon on the show. One oversees what they're doing around climate, and then one drives sustainability through their operations. And and we were also talking about the climate pledge. Amazon is driving this corporate pledge to get to net for corporations to get to net zero by 2040 ahead of schedule. And because Amazon takes it really seriously, and Amazon, I mean, I don't know how many, they probably sell close to $1 trillion worth of stuff, but they probably also, as a company, buy at least $500 million worth of stuff, procure, right, just throughout their operations. Everybody has to do it. Everybody has to actually pay attention to, cutting their own carbon, being a supplier to Amazon, whether that's a company like Interface for the floor tile or something else for, a facility. It's so interesting to me how much influence even just like a private sector company like Amazon is having broadly on other companies to become far more sustainable across their operations.
Definitely. And as a big player, of course, it has way more influence on those players and can always enhance or entice them to go green.
Yes, exactly. Like I would say, quote unquote, encourage.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the role of policy and regulation. So, how important, in your view, is policy in shaping the market climate solutions, such as low carbon building materials? And if you could tell us, are there any specific regulatory trends that you believe will significantly influence adoption in the coming years?
Well, I would say for building materials, it is extremely important. It is an important tool. I think what we see from places like New York City that are, putting policies and regulations on the books requiring more low carbon building is having a big catalytic effect on the market. Similarly, with Boston, Toronto, these kinds of cities are showing that it's just like these are massive markets, right? And like it's an important demand signal. It's also an important signal to get to economies of scale for some of these technologies. Um, so yeah, so I think it can't be understated the just how important it is for the public sector to set through policy and regulation the right playing field for the markets to then respond to, so we get the kind of long-term climate innovation and low carbon building that we're looking for.
I can confirm I'm personally located in Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, do you know how many geothermal buildings you guys have in your city now? It's like,
Yes, I'm even located in a geothermal building.
who
It
you
was
are?
built in 2022, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I was just talking with this guy, Stan Reitzma, who has a company called Geosource, and they drill the boreholes, right, for
Yes,
geothermal, right? And they're very active in Toronto. And I didn't realize quite how pervasive geothermal is, but all of that's from policy, right? All of that's from a city deciding that there's going to be a better way to do it. But one of the things that Stan said to me, and why that I didn't realize, he said, the economics largely work for building owners today to for geothermal. But he's like, but the biggest benefit that could be 8x, 9x more from a financial incentive point of view is for the local utility, right? That's providing energy to that city. Because now when you have geothermal becoming so pervasive in a city, you reduce the spike for demand at those key moments, right? When everyone comes home for work. And so you don't have to fire up the peak natural gas power plant that's very expensive and high carbon, right? You actually are evening out the energy curve. And so there's just all of these benefits. And I say that, say like, why should cities think about policy? There's all of these knock-on benefits that accrue when you start to, affect this kind of change.
exactly. Looking ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, what areas of climate innovation do you believe hold the most potential for real impact and large scale deployment?
Well, I would say there's no question that the combination of solar and storage is I think going to change the world in a much more visible way than we even understand right now. And I say that because of a few things. But one, when you look at the learning curve and cost reduction of solar over the last 5 decades, right, how it's cut the cost has come down 99%. If you project that same cost curve out for another decade, solar goes to a price that's almost like unbelievably cheap. Like you literally can't believe how cheap it's going to be, but all the data would say, that's precisely what's going to happen, right? And that then will unlock opportunities around, it could be desalination, it just all these other use cases for what the kind of world we'll be living in when solar is that much more prevalent, and what that's going to mean for industry and us as consumers. I think alongside that, the dropping cost in battery storage similarly is going to have unbelievable impacts on people's lives, because I'm starting to hear from lots of different circles the notion that when like a hyperscaler now wants to come into your jurisdiction and build a data center, they will start offering people in that data, probably with the utility and with the city, like free batteries for everybody in their home, right? Free storage, so that when so that all that storage in your homes, you get the benefit of it, running your batteries, optimize your home, working like a mini power plant, pulling battery from or energy from your little battery to run your house when energy's high, selling it back to the grid, if you want as well. But the hyperscalers are going to need to do that so that there's actually enough generation on the grid to enable them to get approval to get their data centers built. And so to me, like the next 10 years, forget fossil fuels, man. Like all these places who are like, oh yeah, we're going to go build like natural gas kind of behind the meter for our own data center. Like good luck with that. Where are you going to get the turbines? Like you're going to be waiting 5 years for those turbines anyway. And I just think we're moving to this distributed energy, greater renewable world. And that trend will be even bigger because we already see it outside of America than inside America, right? Like what's happened in Pakistan with solar, or what happens with Ethiopia, as they're like moving to EVs and not wanting to import as much oil. And so, well, I guess I would say one more trend, like solar, storage, and then economic and national security, not wanting to be beholden to fossil fuels, and really not want to be beholden to having to import energy, is going to change a lot also of, what the world looks like 10 years from now.
So
Tack
if
on.
I
Yeah.
sorry. So if I understand correctly, you see even more potential in solar, wind energy rather than nuclear.
I mean, yeah, it's like people talk about, SMR, small nuclear reactors, and it's like, okay, let's revisit it in a decade when maybe one gets built. Like there is no small nuclear reactors, right? There's nothing, right? And like the whole idea of where we're going to go rebuild like large nuclear, like again, it's going to take even longer. And so I place very little stock in that happening, because I just think the economics become so glaringly obvious for, for these technologies, that even the people who are um, resistant, it just becomes economically hard to refute. I think geothermal for many other use cases is going to be massive. Again, but that will probably take 10 years for that start to be reflected, because even what we're seeing on the advanced geothermal side, like starting to do that for utility scale, companies like Fervo, there's only one Fervo, and they haven't really built all that much yet. And so it's going to take, a decade from now, I'm not sure that we're going to be like, oh yeah, we're living in the geothermal century. But 2 decades from now, we might feel that way too. It actually might be far more prevalent. I just think the days of fossil fuels are far more numbered than most people think. And I think the distributed energy grid, purely based on economics and AI and data centers as a driver, is going to get us toward a low carbon future faster than most people think.
There's a lot of happening across energy, materials, agriculture, and carbon management. So it's always interesting to hear which areas experienced founders like you are watching closely. So thank you for that. Before we wrap up, is there anything we didn't touch on that you think would be important to mention?
I mean, I thought this was an excellent line of questions. I appreciate it. I think we covered a lot of
Thank you.
territory. So nothing else jumps to mind. Yeah, I think it was pretty comprehensive.
Josh, thank you again for taking the time to share your insights and experiences today.
Thank you very much.
And for our audience, if you found this discussion helpful, you can find more conversations like this at netzerocompare.com. We regularly speak with founders, researchers, and industry experts working on technologies and strategies related to decarbonization, ESG, emissions reporting, and climate innovation. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.